almost a year, and besides the select board, I probably work most closely with the 2229 Main Street Task Force, which Paul is chair of, and I've been able to see that group since the beginning and how they've organized themselves, how they've set up their work and started to work collaboratively towards a goal, and it's been really inspiring. So I hope that you have the same collaboration and success here. I think your participation here is a testament to your deep commitment and care for Warner Pond. Throughout my time here in Concord, I've really been blown away by the level of volunteerism and the quality of the folks that participate and how much they care, how much you all care. So it's coming out in an evening like this to work with your neighbors and review these documents and come up with a path forward is just very important. I can't emphasize that enough. And so I'm very grateful for your time and energy and expertise and talent. And I think that's it for me. So thank you. And I look forward to popping in here and there, and I hope it's a successful and energizing discussion. Thank you.
Megan, thank you for being here. Okay, so hi everyone, welcome. My name is Toby Berkman.
My name is Rachel Freed.
So we are co-facilitators. We both work for an organization called the Consensus Building Institute, or CBI. So we're a nonprofit. We're based in Cambridge, and essentially we do facilitation and mediation of public policy and environmental issues. So we've been around for over 25 years. I've been working myself at CBI for 10 years. I've been doing public policy mediation since about 20 years ago. So enjoy the work, do a variety of issues, everything from climate, certainly water resources is a meaningful part of my practice as well. And my role here, and Rachel's role as well, is really just to try to help manage these meetings, try to help organize these meetings, ensure that they're inclusive, that they're fair, that we give everyone an opportunity to contribute, that we as a group have an opportunity to really deliberate effectively on the key issues. So we are here essentially to be a resource to help this group function as smoothly as possible, which means that we're really a resource for all of you, right, to help make that happen. I'm a lawyer by training. I hope you won't hold that against me, but I did that for a little while and decided being a corporate litigator was not really my cup of tea. I much prefer to try to sort through tough issues like this with real people. So in any case, really appreciate the chance to be here. I'll give Rachel a chance to introduce herself as well.
Thanks. I'm really pleased to be here. I've been at CBI for a much shorter time than Toby has. I've been at CBI for just about a year. And prior to that, I had a fairly long career in state government at the Department of Environmental Protection. So I come to CBI with a background in environmental work, particularly water issues, but a wide range of work facilitating a lot of conflict resolution and mediation work in state government and also privately, and labor issues as well. And if I work at CBI, it's similar to what Toby's describing. I've been working with municipalities on a range of issues, and other government entities, as well as some nonprofits. It's pretty much within what CBI, what the practice area is. So I'm really pleased to be here and to work on this issue with all of you. And I, like Toby, I hope that you won't hold my time in state government against me either.
All right, great. Thanks, Rachel. So we want to just briefly mention a few operating procedures. We have some folks joining by Zoom. Great that the vast majority of the task force is here in person, but we did just want to kind of go over a little bit of how that works, because we will be doing future meetings on Zoom as well with this group, and just get folks oriented in general. So I'm going to go through these very quickly, but just to name for today, our goals, we want to first of all give you all a chance to introduce yourselves to each other. We want to orient you to what we are all here to accomplish, to the charge of the task force. We want to talk about some group protocols, basically how we as a group want to decide to conduct our business, essentially. So we prepared a draft for you all. We want to share that with you, discuss it, and talk a little bit about potential timeline for our work and what it might look like, just to help everyone get situated. And then we also, at the end, want to spend a little bit of time just as a group helping understand different perspectives that people might have on sort of what the success of our group might look like. So we'll do an exercise at the end on that. So here's our agenda. You also have copies with you. We're gonna do some more introductory work, then move on to overview and protocols, and then that exercise that I mentioned about success, defining success before we wrap up. Just for folks who are online and for this group moving forward, we want to just suggest that if you have a less than optimal internet connection at any time, you dial in. So there are instructions for doing that on the screen. I think that Bill, you're a task force member joining online and your connection seems pretty good. So I think we can press forward, but just generally our request is to make it so you can participate effectively, whatever that takes. We also request that folks mute when they're not speaking, raise hands, right? I think this all kind of goes without saying. In terms of members of the public and their role, I see a hand by a member of the public right now. So this is, task force member, Vicky. Okay, are you testing the hand raise function, Vicky? Just want to make sure we can hear you and know you're there as well. Great.
Yes, I just want to make sure, yeah, I'm a task force member and I'm joining. Yes, thank you.
Vicky, and my apologies, I overlooked.
Okay.
We had a task force member joining online. I'm sorry, you are obviously a key member here. Be welcome.
No worries, no worries.
And a third member, Jeff Quick, as well. Jeff, we see you and recognize you as being here as well. So if you are a member of the task force, we want to suggest, and you're joining online, keep your videos on. We find that if it's okay as a norm for this group, facilitates a lot better interaction, just to see each other. Raise hands to speak. Vicky, you just demonstrated that very effectively. Thank you. Mute when not speaking in the large group. In some meetings in the future, we might invite use of chat. We don't actually have the chat functionality in this meeting, but we may do that moving forward. We will so no individual recordings. We will be recording this meeting and I think future meetings, okay? And then non-members, we want to be clear, are observers only. Okay, so we're very happy to have members of the public here. We may in the future have opportunities for public comments, but for purposes of the body of the task force meetings, you're here to observe, and that's great. We obviously welcome that. In terms of our expectations for participation, pretty clear, be concise, give everyone a chance to speak, be respectful, be constructive. We will talk a little more in detail as we go on in the group protocols about what that means. Okay, so we hope that you all have had a chance to review the charge of this group, why we are here. It explicitly lays out this purpose here, and it's just worth reading all together for a minute to make sure we're all on the same page. So the purpose of this task force, which has been appointed by the Natural Resources Commission, is to become familiar with all the alternatives that have been considered to date and explore new ideas as appropriate. And we'll talk a little more as we go on today about what those two tasks might look like. And then by the end, to recommend a course of action for the pond that reflects community criteria that have been identified in the Envision Concord Bridge 2030 document. You can see those criteria there. So we have sort of predefined for us through that document the kind of the guidelines, the criteria that should direct our decision making. And again, as we move forward, it'll be more clear how we're going to incorporate that and make that happen. All right, so with that, by way of high level overview, I think we'd like to do some introductions. I can turn it over to Rachel. Take it from here.
Yes, so let's do introductions. The thing we'd like you to do in order to keep the introductions from running on for a long time is to just give us your name, the group that you represent or your affiliation, or and then something that you hope to bring to this group, just a sentence, so we can move this right along. And I'd like to start with the people who are online. Bill, do you want to kick us off? Sorry. Surprise. Oh, you're muted.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Bill Kameza, I'm representing the Natural Resources Commission. I've been in Concord for 43 years, so you have that as background. I've walked all the trails. I think I can bring to the table my, among other things, aside from my love of Concord and the outdoors here, I have been head of a school for 17 years in Boston, Boston College High School. So I'm an educator by profession. I retired 7 years ago, and I rewalked all the trails in Concord. So I guess that's what I can bring to this.
Thank you.
Oh, one more thing. One more thing. I just had knee surgery 2 days ago. So I'm either in pain or in drugs, and right now it's a little bit of both. Okay.
Vicky, do you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Vicky Alani, and I live on Warner's Pond. I live on Comm Ave, and I am the upstream abutter representative to the task force. I'm here in Columbia right now. My daughter's getting married in a few days, so I'm sorry I'm on Zoom, but I hope to be in person soon. But what I think I bring to the group is I am an architect by training and profession. I do a lot of large projects, and so I think I bring a view of how to, pull together a large project and the thinking that goes into the community process. I do a lot of community work on the projects that I work on, especially in Boston, which tends to have a lot of community involvement. So I hope to bring some of that experience and definitive ideas about how to pull together a project holistically.
Great, thank you. And Jeff, are you?
Yes, I apologize for lack of video. For some reason my phone is in safe driving mode, even though I'm not driving.
I'm glad you're safe.
Thank you. I'm the director of the Division of Resource Management for the Department of Corrections in Massachusetts, and that's the architectural engineering office for the department. I'm also a registered architect, and what I think I can bring to the table is the resources of our department, as well as the knowledge and history of the Concord site.
Great, thank you. And then let's just go around the table. Anne, right?
Yes, so I'm Ann Clifford. I'm the senior planner with the town of Concord. I work with the Historical Commission and the HDC and the CPC and Battle Road Scenic Byway. And I live in Natick, where they recently removed a dam. So I just, I think that the history of Warner's Pond goes back much farther than, the 1850s when the dam was installed, back, thousands of years to the Native Americans who lived here before. I think that often gets overlooked in the survey forms that the Massachusetts Historical Commission creates. They sort of look at 19th and 20th century history, but the longer history of pre-settlement, I think, was interesting.
I'm Bruce Gross. I'm from the Hassan and Mithro Band of Nipmuc Indians. Of course, she just took all of mine. So what I hope to bring is sort of an indigenous idea when we talk about the ideas of water, waterways. I'm a former chairman of the Mass Commission on Indian Affairs. I work with water every day. I'm the executive director of the Blackstone River Watershed Council. Just came on board. I've been part of their board for many years now. And I'm actually our water representative for our tribe. So dams, waterways, we're very interested in looking at that, a lot of it from the ecological perspective of it, from silt and pollution to how we get those waterways back as well as close to as possible, although we're not against what a community decides.
Thank you.
My name is Christine Denaro, and I am representing the downstream abutter for the task force. And my background is I have lived on the dam. I live on Commonwealth Avenue, and I've lived on the dam for 34 years. And so I'm very familiar with the dam and how it works and what happens in Warner's Pond. And so I bring that flavor to the table, as well as I have a background in education. I'm also retired, and I also have a background in international business. So I feel that I, bring a different perspective to the group here, but definitely the personal aspect of living on Warner's Pond for so long.
Thank you.
I'm Liz. I am an at-large representative, although I am also a Chris's neighbor. I'm also, and I think what I bring to the table is, I spend a lot of my, kind of volunteer time with various like Girl Scouts, with the PTGs, with my son's preschool. So I do a lot of thinking about, sort of the kids and what it's gonna be like for them to grow up. And so I kind of, I see kids out there a lot. I think about it a lot. I think about what it's gonna be like for 10 years from now, 15 years ago. So I think that's sort of the perspective I'm trying to bring. Thank you.
I am Malcolm Bryant. I'm an at-large member. My background is as a public health physician, mostly working in community development in Africa and South Asia, as well as the US. And what I bring, I think, is I've lived in Concord now for 25, nearly 30 years. At one point, I actually lived in the same house that Vicky lives in. Strange to see that address come up there. So I wasn't a butter at one point. And I live in West Concord. And I guess I bring the perspective of an ordinary citizen of Concord.
Hey, hi, I'm Sven. I'm here for the Public Works Commission. I actually just live in Concord for the last 4 years, so I probably have the least history and the least baggage potentially here. But I can bring on the table my background is in financial services, venture capital on one end. I'm educated master in physics. I worked on climate change models back in the times. So I often just try to bring it back to some basic parameters and try to get out of the weeds and looking at larger pictures.
Thank you.
So, hello, my name is Keith Hannon, representing the Friends of Warner's Pond here. I grew up in Concord, and interestingly enough, there's no proof of this yet, but I'm pretty sure I may be the first town employee to go out in Warner's Pond and pull water chestnut in the mid-90s under Dan Monahan, who's Dealey's predecessor. So that's an interesting, I just have a long connection there from my lifetime here with the pond. I also work for the US Army Corps of Engineers. I'm a project manager in the Civil Works department. And we plan civil works projects, including dredging projects, and we execute these projects. So I have a background in habitat restoration. I'm a professional wetland scientist. And so I think I bring a pretty broad background and general, well, I see the value in all the things we're talking about. So I hope to be able to help guide some consensus.
I'm Jeff Collins. I live on Highland Street in West Concord. And had great experiences on Warner's Pond, skating and canoeing and camping on Scout Island with my son. And as a member of the West Concord Advisory Council, was involved in the conversations that led to protection of the Giroux property. I am in the ORS seat, the local watershed organization. I'm on the board there. I've been there for 3-4 years. And so that's how I came here. Professionally, I work for Mass Audubon. I'm a director of our conservation science department there, which includes our ecological restoration team. And so I have about 25 years of experience with land stewardship, ecological restoration, permitting, habitat management, et cetera. And as I think Ann and Bruce asked us to think through time at the site, I'd also like to think, and Bruce mentioned this, through space and how Warner's Pond and our decisions there connect across the landscape and through the entire watershed.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm Paul Bohm. I'm the appointee from the Recreation Commission. I'm also on CPC through the Recreation Commission as well. I live in town 46 years. So I may be one of the earliest visitors to Scout Island with my son in this group, so the mid-80s. By professionally, I'm an environmental scientist. I deal with a lot of complex sites and a lot of complex issues, some of which involve litigation, but my work is on ecological restoration, on natural resource damage assessment. I've worked on a number of very complex issues that involve science and human use and emotions and technology. So I think I bring not only the scientific input here, but kind of working on these complex issues, which I think we really have here today.
Well, I'm humbled. As Megan said, it's very impressive company to be in here. So professionally, my background is 35 years in product management of AI technology and healthcare, which means that basically you're taking input from a lot of stakeholders and you're always guaranteed to disappoint a few, but used to working with groups to come to consensus on things. My purpose here is really to represent the scouting community in Concord. I'm the secretary of the board of the Concord Scout House. I've been a scout leader for 15 years. I have 2 boys, 1 girl. The 2 boys became Eagle Scouts. And I've attained Wood Badge, which is kind of the highest training you can get in Boy Scouts. I also serve as the town unit commissioner to, we have the Flintlock District, which is a collection of towns here, and then above that is the council. So I'm Concord's representative to the district, which then reports up to the council. The way the Boy Scouts works is a local nonprofit becomes the charter organization of the local units. The Girl Scouts do not have this kind of contractual relationship. I liken it to kind of like a franchise. We get rechartered every year, so we could lose our charter. We have to maintain, a good program here. For that, we take it very seriously. So the Concord Scout House is a nonprofit here, whose mission is scouting and other activities for the community. We also own the barn on Walden Street that has the barn preschool in the bottom. It's got an active dance community that comes and uses the barn 2 or 3 nights a week typically. And we also own Scout Island in the middle of Warner's Pond. The Scouts utilize that island primarily every year. That is our main ceremony where the Cub Scouts cross over to become Boy Scouts and paddle out to the island, and we do that. The way I intend to approach this is I really want to be an effective vehicle between the task force and particularly the Scouts directly, especially the Boy Scouts is, if it's a program that's run well, it's Scout led. And so it's been very nice that already we've had a presentation by a Scout about Warner's Pond. Delia came and presented to the Scouts directly, as well as Tracy Dunn from the Friends of Warner's Pond. And I would like to kind of continue that as we can effectively support that direct education and then to get their impressions and be the conduit of their voice back to this task force.
Thank you.
Great. I'm Mark Howell. I'm the select board representative. And first I want to, on behalf of the select board, thank all of you already for the service that you're about to give. I think it's extremely important in Concord. We value input from every corner that we can get it. We really firmly believe that that input makes us all better, smarter, and we can act together. I am very fond of the way we open every town meeting with a reminder that we need to listen to each other and that we will not always have each and everything work out just exactly the way we want, but hopefully in processes like these, we end up maximizing the benefit for the community overall. The select board will ultimately have to make decisions responding to the recommendations that come out of this committee via the the Natural Resources Commission. I'm a particular fan of the task force approach. I think that people's time is valuable. I think the input and the resources that we can bring to bear as a community on problems are really pretty unprecedented, especially if we don't ask people to sign up for life when given a task. Most of these issues that come before us, have a little bit of shelf life. That said, it's great that we started with a historic reminder because we are living in a historic community and we are trying to make decisions for the long term. So I'll be looking down the road at how we do this. I was impressed to hear all of the people that have, strong process backgrounds in this group. And so I'll be, wanting us to mind our process steps. To that end, I think that there's a couple of things that we need to be reminded about. We need to select the chairperson. We need to understand who's the clerk of this meeting. And we need to follow open meeting law so that we're, processing minutes and I'm going to be encouraging us to also pay attention to those things as we go forward. So again, thank you so much for your service. We've already put a lot of work into this just to get to this point, and I'm really optimistic about where we're going.
Thank you.
Bert Coleman's an assistant director for the Natural Resources Division. I've been in Concord for just over a year now. Prior to that, I have several years of experience working with municipal governments, doing wetlands protection and open space stuff. While I was in those other communities, there were some big questions being asked in town that were not agreed upon by everybody. Probably could use CBI a couple times. So it's really encouraging to be here and to see how engaged this community is and everyone coming out. I think it's going to be a good task force to be with. So obviously I'm not a voting member or anything like that, but I'm just here to provide any staff support that might be needed as task force works out its charge.
Thank you. I'm Delia Camp, the Natural Resources Director. I've served in this role since 2006, and I am a wildlife biologist. I have a degree in wildlife biology in both here. My work is in wetlands and wildlife, habitat restoration, protection. And I think, prior to coming to Concord, I was a wetlands and wildlife consultant. So I think I can bring to this table an understanding of permitting. I have a lot of, I've worked on Warner's Pond since I got here with the Warner's Pond Stewardship Committee until about 2012, members of the community. And so I wasn't as early as Keith pulling water chestnut, but I have been out doing that. We still continue to do it with our conservation crew. So I hope to be able to bring some institutional knowledge about what has happened over the years at Warner's Pond. And I think that will be very much fleshed out by members of the community on the task force. And I just like to echo everybody's thanks and gratitude for everybody coming, stepping up and participating. I think this is going to be a great task force, and I look forward to working with you and with CBI.
Thank you all for such great and helpful introductions and giving us a little insight as to who you are and a few hints about maybe what you're hoping for. It really is an impressive group. It really is.
Great. All right. Thanks, Rachel. So I'm actually going to hand it right over to Delia to give us a little bit of an overview of sort of what brought us here today, what we're being asked to do in the charge before we move into some of our group protocols.
Great.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Toby. So I think most people understand why we are here, but just to sort of get everybody on the same page, Warner's Pond has been a community resource and an important wildlife resource for generations. And it has experienced eutrophication for the past number of decades. Keith, you were out on the pond in the 90s. And so already at that point, we are seeing shallow water depths, which is leading to, dense growth of aquatic invasives, which is not great for fisheries, for wildlife. And it has decreased the recreational opportunities available at the ponds. And so, since I've worked here and prior to that time, the town has looked at ways to address the problems that have been facing Warner's ponds. And it started with, getting rid of invasives. So, hand harvesting, water, mechanical harvesting, herbicide treatments, and then it moved into more of a sediment and nutrient removal thought process. And so with the 2012 watershed management plan that identified limited dredging as an effective solution to achieve these goals that we've been working towards for decades, we proceeded to work towards that. It's a lot of permitting, it's a lot of investigation, a lot of feasibility. And so by 2022, we had permits in hand. We went out to bid. We had about $2.5 million at that point secured for the dredging project. And that dredging project, I think everybody understands, was never intended to be a full pond dredge. It was intended to be 6 acres of the 50+ acre pond. So we went out to bid, August 2022. We received 1 bid and it came in at more than 3 times the allocated funding. And so with that exorbitantly high bid, working with the consultant, we said, okay, that's a really high bid. What other options are available to us? So we worked with the consultant to identify 3 additional alternatives that had not been considered. One was a modified dredging approach because the sediment removal and disposal was an extraordinarily high cost of the bid. So we thought, why not just move the sediment within the pond so we don't have to take it out and truck it and deal with that? So that was one option. We called it the modified dredging approach. And the second was dam removal. And the third was a no action alternative. And through that process of the alternatives analysis, dam removal was identified as the approach that would hit all of the community, financial, ecological goals, as well as, the ecological and the recreational capacity. That dam removal caused some concern amongst members of the community, and it was a big shift in our strategy. And so the Natural Resources Commission, in response to that community concern, said, okay, let's take a step back, or let's take a pause. And rather than just proceed with the dam removal for 2024 town meeting, let's see, if there are other options. I think both the Natural Resources Commission and division staff want to be sure that there are no stones left unturned. And so the purpose of this task force is to evaluate all the alternatives that that are out there, that have been studied, and identify if there are others. John Coleman has come up with a side channel alternative that would retain some of the pond by creating berms and then allow the Neshoba Brook to flow around that. Is that feasible, and what does that mean? So this is something that the task force, we are working with our consultant EA still, and they are under contract to evaluate up to 5 alternatives. So I hope this task force will work to identify other feasible options that we haven't thought of. And then through this process and looking through the lens of Envision Concord, which is essentially the comprehensive long-range plan for the town, looking through that lens, how are we going to proceed with a course of action for Warner's Pond? And those recommendations that are developed by the task force will be brought to the Natural Resources Commission. And if there is a major action that is identified by this task force, that major, and it's accepted by the NRC, then that recommendation would be brought forward for community approval at a future town meeting.
Do you want to share anything more about sort of the 10 tasks in the chart?
Yeah, I mean, we can go through those 10 tasks. I think everybody has had the opportunity to look at, what those are. So we want to have a site visit, make sure, I mean, some of you are very familiar with Warner's Ponds, others are not. So there are 3 public access points. Everyone knows Giroux and Commonwealth, but you might not know Pond Street. So becoming familiar with those, we have developed a web page. And we're gonna put reports up there, so the watershed management plan, the dredging feasibility study, other reports and documents. We want people to understand the information that has already been collected, so that there's that kind of collective understanding that everybody in this group has. And what are the ecological health options that are available, and that maybe, Jeff is also, an ecologist. There are people that have that strength, but that might be something that we need some outside, assistance in evaluating. Same with the recreational opportunities. It has been a paramount issue that we want to make sure that whatever alternative is pursued, that, Scout Island needs to be maintained as a crossing over and other, resource for the scouting community. But the public also, we want the public to be able to have recreational ability, passive recreational opportunities at Warner's Ponds. Preliminary cost estimates. So whatever feasible alternatives are identified by this group, let's understand what those costs are so that they can be compared consistently. Understanding, dam removal has caused consternation by some in the community. That's very clear. That's partly why we're here. Let's understand what those issues are. And, dam removal, I think, it is an option and it may not be the right one for this community resource, but let's understand what those are. So we are all, in the same kind of a realm of understanding with that. We want to have input from the community. So we're planning at least 2 public outreach meetings, but there may be other ways of engaging the community that this task force will determine is going to be more, or, an effective approach. And are there things that we haven't thought of that this task force comes up with that we need more time to evaluate? And that is something that will come out as through the course of this task force. And then by December 2nd, it had said December 1st, that's a Sunday, so we changed it to December 2nd, a report to go to the NRC that basically evaluates, and Toby and Rachel will talk a little bit more about, the reporting and how this, will work. But to have something that can be delivered to the NRC that goes through and looks at, what alternatives and what approach the NRC should be considering moving forward.
Great, and just for clarity, the purpose of that deadline is in case there's something that needs to go to town meeting, it would be in time for that to be reviewed by the NRC and be brought to town meeting in 2025.
Right.
Excuse me, will you take questions now, or do you want to?
Sure, question is great. Go ahead.
To what extent will EA, your consultant, be available to and a resource to this task force? If there are technical issues and questions,
So we have a contract with EA to prepare the 30% dam removal design, but we also have public outreach as part of it. So we are in the process of doing some change modifications to that contract so that we can have them serve as a resource to this task force. So as I said, already we know that they have the 5 alternatives for recreation and, so 5 alternatives up to 5 that they will evaluate. And I would fully anticipate they would come to this task force and present those and be available for questions.
I'm just thinking if we kick around some idea that we'd like to bounce off them, which is not one of the 5, you're saying they probably would be.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that is, they will be here for a resource for us. They're not gonna be something where we can just keep sort of pulling them in, but that's the idea, is that they are gonna be here as a resource for this task force.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Sven. Yep.
Yeah, number 2 is to review prior reports, plans, and other documents. Is there system to make them effectively available?
So what I will do, we have just today, created the Warner's Pond Task Force page.
Okay,
And on that page currently is the 2012 Watershed Management Plan, the 2018 Dredge Feasibility Study, the 2023 Alternatives Analysis Report, and the Envision Concord comprehensive long-range plan. So those documents are on the website, and I will send that link out after the meeting. And there may be others that, you know, you as a group say, well, I want to review this. Whatever you want to review that we have, we can put up on the webpage so that it's available to everybody on the task force to be able to look at.
Can I just
Yeah.
clarify, sorry, so can I just clarify what you were saying about EA? Are they on to like any 5 more or like 2 more? Because they've already evaluated 3 sort of ideas.
5 more.
Okay.
And I see Bill Mesa.
Great, yeah, please, Bill, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if this PowerPoint will also be put on that webpage for us to review.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
So I do have a question. So I am curious to just understand more, just like what was done when in the past, including like herbicide application and like how much was used. I mean, is there records of that that could be easily uploaded as
Yeah.
well? That would
So we
be,
have a 2011 herbicide report.
Yeah.
That I can put up on the website.
that'd be great. Yeah, because I know they used to use a harvester, which obviously didn't work because it spreads
Right.
milfoil, right? So yeah. So-
Yeah.
So don't worry about that one.
Right.
Any other questions just on the, so it sounds like yes is the answer to that.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other questions just on the charge? Yeah, okay, so a couple, and then I do want to press forward just for time, but go ahead, Malcolm.
Just in terms of the documents, I've seen the pesticide, the herbicide report. Is that the only time herbicide has been
Yes.
applied? Okay.
And I do see Vicky.
Vicky too. Okay,
Yes.
so we'll go to David and then we'll go to Vicky online. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, just looking at, number 1 is, and then I got a second question about 3 and 4. Number 1, will there be kind of an organized trip there with someone who can narrate, about that, or are we just supposed to go out on our own? Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
I think we should do that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
and would the scouts be able to observe in that, or would that be unwieldy?
I think if that's, you know, something that the group decides would be helpful, we
Okay.
can certainly, you know,
And-
welcome that.
And then I see in 3 and 4 that, you know, look at other feasible opportunities. Is that where site visits to other places that maybe have had a dam removed or had remedial work done? Would there be site
You know,
visits?
so I'm gonna just take a page out of the 2229 Main Street committee. And they basically established working groups and they were given tasks or workflows. So that maybe there's, you know, 2 or 3 members that go and they say, we're gonna go look at, you know, other dam removal sites or whatever it is. Maybe that is an approach that the task force wants to take, rather than having every task be something that every member.
And so, yeah, so I'm asking simply just because that's the kind of thing that really engages the scouts, and if there's
Yeah,
a
yeah.
visit somewhere, I'd like
So-
to know about it.
Yeah, I mean, I think just generally, and, you know, we'll get to this as we kind of, move on, you know, we're gonna have conversations with each of you individually to hear about any ideas you have, how to make this a effective process. As a group, we're gonna talk about the kind of process that we want to use, what different people think would be helpful for example, getting familiar with the pond or getting public input in a way that's gonna be, you know, actually targeted and useful for the decisions we need to make, right? So all of that, and any question like, could we do this? Could we do that? I mean, the answer is yes, like this is for the group to decide. We're gonna figure out how we want to run ourselves and what you all want to do, right? So generally like, yes, okay, but we'll talk about it. I mean, this is a collective, right? Okay, so great. I'm gonna go to Vicky online. Go ahead, Vicky.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to just put out there for this task force, because I think what I love about this opportunity is that it is kind of a clean slate for the town to start this conversation in a way that's not heated, with all of the previous, sort of repartee about what's going on. Here, this is our chance to clean all that up, bring back trust, bring back conversation. So I'd like to make sure that none of us are going out there saying that there is reduced recreation on the pond today, because how did we make that determination? That is like a final determination. I'd want to make sure we're not saying that the dam removal is the preferred method of dealing with things right now. Because I want to make sure we all get to those decisions together and trusting each other, because we all get out into the community and are saying things, and it's part of this task force's work to clean that up. Other people can continue to say that, but this task force, I really feel, needs to be neutral until we do this work together.
Yeah, Vicky, thanks a lot for that, that comment. So we're gonna share with you in a minute, the group protocols that we came up with just as a suggestion, in advance. And one of the issues that I think we wanna clarify, and get buy-in around is this question that you've raised, Vicky, how do we deal with speaking with outsiders, right? So, certainly speaking within the community is one piece, or the media is another piece, right? So, I would, our suggestion is very much along the lines of what you just said, Vicky. And we think it's important to be tactful, for us to be thoughtful about what we say externally, and that nothing that we say to the media or outside will kind of damage the integrity and sort of the productiveness of this group. And so I thank you for raising that. And I think, let me go ahead and I'm going to press forward and share some of these suggested protocols, and we can talk about how this group wants to handle those kinds of questions, right? Okay, so let me just press forward, and we're going to talk a little bit about, as I mentioned, these protocols. So this is another document that you all have, if you're in person here as a printout, and was sent around this morning, if you're joining online. And it just lays out some basics about how, first of all, just core elements of how this group is organized and its authority, but also sort of how we want to choose to work together. So just generally, as Julia laid out when describing the charge, also in the group protocols, it's really clear on our authority, which is to develop a shared recommendation for the Natural Resources Commission to take under advisement. So we ourselves are not deciding what will happen to the town, to the pond, that will go to the NRC. Right, I think, I'm not going to speak for Julia, but I think it's safe to say if this group feels very strongly and there's a lot of collective energy around a particular option, that will obviously hold a lot of weight with the NRC and what it chooses to do. Right? So I think they're very seriously looking to this group for guidance. The composition, we have voting members, right, who represent various community perspectives. We have some non-voting members who are full participants in every meeting. Just when it comes, the only difference is when it comes to the very end and we sort of are doing tallies of votes, those members are not voting, but every other kind of element of their participation, they're full members. In terms of what we are expecting for time commitment, what we're anticipating, and again, this is all open for discussion around what the group thinks it needs. We imagined roughly 10 meetings, so that equates to just a little bit more, around once a month, for the group to come together. There may be, David, to your or to your point, Julia, to David's question, we may do subcommittees that kind of meet between meetings and want to advance specific issues, right? But at least kind of around 10 meetings, it'll be virtual, some a hybrid like this one, where we love to have people in person, in other cases, between now and December. Online meetings, we're probably talking 2 to 3 hours, maybe 2.5 on average. If we're meeting in person, or we might, and the kind of special opportunities to do that, we might go longer, right? If we're meeting a lot in person, maybe it's closer to 2.5 each time. Again, we can talk about how exactly we want to do that. Between meetings, there's also important responsibilities. So they'll be giving homework, right? Reading. We're going to give you some, after this meeting. But you'll be responsible for tracking project-related communications, responding on scheduling issues, et cetera. Reviewing draft documents, potentially drafting language, right? When we get to the reporting stage. And just generally being prepared, for the issues that are gonna be on the agenda in each meeting. In terms of facilitation and note-taking, so CBI is gonna be taking on those responsibilities, so Rachel and I are kind of tag teaming today. We might have another colleague in the future, who come take that role. And we'll also be facilitating, so we're kind of in charge of the documentation and facilitation. When it comes to the final report, we'll be the main drafters, but I say that, and the reality is there'll be a lot of contributions from task force members, and our role is sort of like a fiduciary, is to express the will of the group, right? But you know, someone has to hold the pen, and might as well be us, right? Okay, we want to talk a little bit about some suggested expectations or ground rules. And so these appear in a little more detail in the group protocols document. This is a summary. And this is just based on sort of our experience and what tends to be helpful with groups like this. But you know, I think we want to get your buy-in, and certainly if there are amendments, that's great. If people wants to agree to those. So we like to say as a first expectation, take space, make space. So simply put, we really want contributions from everyone. Each of you is representing a really important constituency. So we in fact need everyone to speak, to contribute, to be an active member of this group, or we're not getting those full range of perspectives. At the same time, we want to encourage people to be conscious of how much you're speaking, and try to make airtime for others if you're a very vocal person. We want to also foster a safe environment for our discussion. So that means some basics around how we treat each other. It's being honest about your perspective, right? Even if it might be hard for other people to hear, right? That's important to share. It means being respectful if you have a difference with someone. It's assuming good intentions if someone brings something that is hard for you to hear, right? And it is basically being attentive to the impact of what you might say, right? If you think it might be very upsetting, and it's honest, right? You need to say it, but say it in a way that you think can be heard effectively by others. We also have some guidance around how to be an effective participant. So clearly attendance and preparation. I think there's an expectation if you're on this task force, you'll be coming to just about all the meetings. We had a lot of applicants for this. It turns out more than we could accept. So we really want people who can be here prepared and participate actively. Also, active participation isn't just at the meetings. So I was really encouraged to hear at least a couple of you say that you see part of your role as sort of checking in with the constituent group and kind of floating ideas by them, seeing what reactions there are, bringing those perspectives into this room. We'll talk about exactly when that might be most appropriate or when it's going to be helpful versus not. But generally, that's a really important role. So being willing and able to do that is going to help us come up with proposals that will be as acceptable as possible. Working to bridge differences, right? We know those are going to come up. The question is, do we react and try to be creative to overcome them, or do we kind of hearken into or kind of get down into our respective tracks? And then generally try to keep us on track with agendas. And then fourth and finally, communicating thoughtfully. So Vicky, you raised the point around how we communicate outside meetings. And we have a kind of on the screen here, treat each other with respect within and outside meetings, or communicate with respect within and outside meetings. And I think our general thinking on this is we don't think it's necessary or appropriate to have kind of like a confidentiality rule. You can't talk about the task force outside the task force, right? I mean, it's a public meeting anyway, right? Everyone's here. But I think at the same time, we want to recognize that there are forms of communication outside the task force that can really enable us to do our job better, and forms of communication that can be less helpful. So for example, we suggest it could be totally fine for you to share your opinion, your personal opinion on options that are being talked about, right? That's fine, right? Someone asks you, what do you think about this? Oh, I don't really think it's a great idea, or I actually think it could have a lot of legs. We'll see what comes out in when we learn more, right? That's great. In my mind, totally fine. On the other hand, saying, Sven, I don't know where he's coming from, right? He has these crazy ideas, right? And, they're never going to fly, right? That's unproductive, right? That comes back and it's pretty damaging. Or someone trying to speak, on behalf of the task force as a whole. Like, I really think we as a group are kind of homing in on this perspective, right? We don't think it's productive for anyone to kind of take on the role of representing the group as a whole. Let's let our sort of final words that we all agree on represent us as a group. On the other hand, if there is no request and people want the voice of the task force on something, and you feel like it merits a response, we can bring that to the group, right? And think about how we collectively want to respond. Another important element of communication and how we deal with things outside the group is what we like to call a no surprises policy. So we know there's lots of information, lots of data, lots of things that we could research as a group, research individually or as a group. Our suggestion, and the way this tends to work most effectively, is if there are things you want to dig into, right? Let's bring that to the group, right? And decide what are the things we want to go look at, or is everyone okay if I and one other task force member kind of look into this specific issue? Do we agree this is a useful way to spend our time, useful research to be doing? Great. I think we just want to kind of be aware of what people want to look into and what they are looking into. It's not that we want to prevent anyone from doing anything that they think is important. So I just want to check in to my co-facilitator so Delia, I know we spoke about this in advance. Anything you'd want to add to any of these pieces?
Nope.
So let me just check in with the group. Does this all land? I mean, are we okay kind of agreeing to what I just laid out? Are there concerns or additional perspectives or ideas? Yeah, Mark, go ahead.
So I'd just like to add one thing. I think this is a pretty experienced group, but if this is your first time serving on a committee for the town, please do spend some time with the committee handbook and take a little time to understand the open meeting law and talk to any one of us that's sort of done this before, or you can seek guidance from an NRC member or the town clerk if you're confused about. There are some things that, because we're a public body, we do need to pay attention to. And so if you are not disagreeing with anything there, but
Yeah.
there's just an and that goes with that if this is your first time around in that role.
What was the
And I-
portion of the handbook you emphasized?
I've read it a bunch of times, but there are some things about communications. The point about communicating on behalf of the committee is an important one. The administration, that we will need to take votes, we will need to keep minutes, we will need to, maintain some records and things like that. And so if you're communicating with somebody with respect to business of this committee, you should, try and save that. And there's some records management kinds of things, and there's also some information about what to do if you feel in any way, shape, or form conflicted about anything that comes up, or, there's just some things that you really should know because you are being appointed to a public body committee. So, I'm not sure if that applies to anybody or not, but I see a few people who are nodding their heads. So please do take a look at this and let us know if you have
And
questions.
just to sort of follow on that, I would say that with any, town committee, subcommittee, the biggest issue that I think we have with the open meeting law is email. It's very problematic because the whole purpose of open government is transparency, and email makes it very challenging to be transparent. So nobody should be communicating with, it's best to bring all communications to the group, but basically the concern from the open meeting law perspective is what they call serial communication. So, somebody, the chair, the co-chair, can distribute documents, or, Toby, whoever can distribute documents. And nobody should then say, oh, this is what I think about that, because now you have started what the Attorney General or Inspector General considers serial communication, because the public cannot see that deliberation. So documents, emails can go out, discussion should be brought to the meeting.
You'll be getting an email from the town clerk with some links to some specific trainings that's associated with this, the open meeting law and the conflict of interest training, which are online, which are also really useful at explaining what Delia was just talking about. And so it's, you know, it's just important to become familiar with that and ask some questions up front, because believe it or not, the people that we're sort of most restricted about talking about this subject with at this stage of the game are the people that are in this room at the moment. And so we do need to be paying attention to that. And just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Mark. I see a couple of hands, go to Paul and then Keith.
So if
Oh,
we,
sorry, I think,
oh, sorry,
Paul first
Paul
and then
and
Keith,
then
yeah.
Keith. Sorry,
Just heard my name. I have a structural question and a process question. As far as a chair of this group, will you effectively be acting as the chair?
We'll get to that in a
People?
second.
Okay.
Yeah, we're getting to that second.
Because you talk about setting agendas and so, okay,
Yeah,
get
yeah.
the second one maybe it's a little premature. I'm looking at the deadline of December 2nd, and
Yeah.
I'm looking at all the various facets that we really have to consider.
Yeah,
You know,
overwhelming,
I've
huh?
kind of listed
Yeah.
these.
Yeah.
I think it's almost gonna be important that the idea of breaking into affinity groups to take on
Mhm.
certain issues is really gonna be important, because we can't handle all, you know, you have ecological, you have recreational, you have cost issues, you have community issues,
Yeah,
you have connectivity, there are lots of issues
yeah,
involved in any deliberation. So I'm just saying, probably sooner than later would be great
Yeah.
for us to understand if we're going to be thinking about everything, or do we have majors and minors, or do we have,
yeah.
or we're
yeah.
majoring in everything?
So I mean, just to 100% concur, I think a lot of the work is gonna have to be making sure that the time we spend together is super efficient and we're very well prepared to really focus on exactly what we need to. So that's a lot on sort of Rachel and on the planning team, right? Making sure that happens, but it's also incumbent on this group to kind of help us do that. So as I mentioned, we're gonna be doing some sort of welcome onboarding calls with each of you, and I think we really want your advice, your thinking on what are the things that we could bring to these meetings that are gonna be most helpful to you, to help you think through these decisions.
Thank you.
Yeah, Keith, go ahead.
So what is the best way, like say we have a website or a file to share that we think might be beneficial for the task force to review?
Yeah,
What's the best way to share that with the group then in advance of the next meeting?
so, I think generally we can send out documents via email. We're gonna have the website, which is publicly accessible, right? So, generally the documents that we're viewing are gonna be up there public, right? If there are private things that wanna be sent out a question, or is it just generally how we're gonna?
Like a
access documents?
website or another public document that.
Yeah,
might
so
be
we'll have a
useful.
website with all the documents.
But
on it.
but if I have it, how do I
Right.
get it there?
Send
So I
it
just
to,
send it-
send it to Bert and I.
Yeah,
Okay.
send it to us, yeah.
So is there any reason to have your email addresses then?
I think have our email addresses, you can CC us to
Yeah.
those emails.
Yeah,
I think
for
it's
sure. I
important
think that
for
would be
us
good.
to-
Yep.
Yeah.
So if there's something where somebody says, I think this is something that the task force should review at the next
Yeah.
meeting, email it to,
Mhm.
I would say the
Okay.
four of us, and we can get it up on the website. Maybe we have a tab that says documents to be reviewed prior to next meeting or something like that, and everybody
Yeah.
looks at that before the meeting.
Good, thank you.
Sure. Vicky, I just want to check in, this is a hand from before, or is it the new hand?
Sorry, from before, I didn't take it down. I'm sorry.
All right, you lowered it. Okay, so just to come back to, excuse me, the expectations, are we good with this, specifically around sort of the external communications? I think is an important one, but generally, is everyone on board with what's laid out here?
Sorry.
Yeah, David,
Just
please.
what about press? I mean, does that fall under?
Yeah,
this
so
Communication, or we figure that
Yeah.
out later?
my suggestion on that in press, I think that falls under the external communication, right? Again, if press wants to talk to David and, you talk about your own perspective, right? I don't think we want to inhibit anyone from doing that. I think our request would be, whatever you share, try to do it, in a way that is gonna, not make our work as a group harder, right? But you can certainly share your perspective on the issues as an individual. It's just don't speak on behalf of anyone else.
Yeah,
or
I
the
guess
group
I
as a
was
whole.
thinking more like would we want to formalize to say, hey, let's get something out for the press, so proactively, so people aren't
Yeah.
asking everybody, what's up? We're proactively
Yeah,
That's
so-
certainly something that groups have
Yeah.
have done.
Yeah.
I mean, I think part of the concept that we're trying to set here is that you're a group, you know, this is a group and this is a space for you to all work together, and you want to try to create that unity. Even if you have different opinions, which you all do, that's fine, different opinions, different expertise, that's part of why these task forces can be so effective. And so some groups that can develop that kind of unity over time can make decisions together about, oh, you know, we're getting requests from, I'm hearing scuttlebutt in the town from, maybe this is a good time for us as a group to speak as a group. So that's part of the idea of having decisions like the no surprises rule, having decisions come in and ideas come in to be deliberated here in kind of this safe space. So that there could be a thoughtful, you know, exchange of ideas about what do we do? Should we do something? Should we not? So I know that it can be very uncomfortable to get a call from the press, and I think part of what we're trying to do is to empower you that you don't have to speak at all if you don't want to, but it's really helpful to bring it back to inform everybody else about what kind of queries you're getting.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it's better for us as a task force to be proactive.
Yeah, so, I mean, that's great, and I think we, again, I don't think we want to talk about specifically what we might want to do on that front today, but if that is something that you're interested in, 100%, we can share communication as a group and work on that together. Yeah, Sven and then Jeff.
Yeah, this touches more kind of the end of the process where it goes to bridging differences. When it comes to, say, the hopefully final weeks where we have to get to the point to make a recommendation, and I understand we shoot for more than 75%. So is the expectation for everyone here to, when the decision is on the table to be made, to make a decision which is in the best interest of the group they're representing? Or is the expectation that people should make a best judgment for the best interest of the town as a whole? So what is the expectation in the end, towards the end here?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I don't think we have an answer to that, right? I think the task that you are being asked to do, which is challenging, is sort of to wear both of those hats, right? I think you all are here because you want to support the town of Concord. You kind of feel that civic duty, which is fantastic. It's amazing, right? And you also feel beholden to the groups that you're representing. So, I mean, I think there's a tension there, and it's something that you're going to live with and have to figure out in the end how you want to reconcile that, right? And I'll just say, we'll get to the voting in a minute, but for some people, it might be like, I recognize that this is what's best for the town, right? It's, you know, I have you know, some significant misgivings about it for my constituency, but I at least could live with it, right? Or maybe I'm not going to oppose it, right? Even if I'm not totally enthusiastic about it, right? And so those are different ways you can vote depending on how you want to wrestle with that internal conflict. But in terms of, you know, the decision you make, I mean, that's your decision as Sven, right? That you're going to have to make, and how you balance those two hats. Yeah, great question. Jeff, I think, is that responsive? Yeah. Yeah, okay, great, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Just clarifying the communication that those of us who are in seats representing an organization, whether it's Friends of Warner's Pond, Scouts, or that the communication standards apply to us as committee members and our you know, best efforts and commitment to each other here. The organizations, though, may have statements on it. You know, I'm a board member, but not a director of staff, and they may be making presentations or have some position on the fate of the pond over the next year. So I just want to, I guess, commit to each other that we as committee members are adhering to these standards, but the I don't know if it.
You can't control your
the-
organization.
The
Yeah,
organization.
yeah, that's absolutely true. This is, and everything is for this group, for, you know, the task force members. And I think another thing important to kind of upend to my communication with Sven there is when you vote, you are voting as a task force member, as an individual. You are not saying ORS or the Public Works Commission supports this, right? You are voting as an individual, so it's up to you how you want to balance that, right? I hope that's clear. All right, I want to press forward. I think Rachel, we might have to postpone the fantastic group exercise,
That's
but
okay, because this is a really
really
robust
important, yeah.
discussion.
So let's talk a little bit about the decision rule, and I want to make sure everyone has clarity on what we're suggesting. And just for transparency, the CBI facilitated the Natick process that Anne was referencing. And this is a decision rule that was used there. And so we felt like, I hope this is an accurate statement. If it's good enough for Natick, it's good enough for Concord.
We don't want to set you up against
yeah.
each other.
Yeah. But, our idea is, the goal here is really twofold. We want to really value everyone's opinion, right, and everyone's perspective. And we want to get as many people in this task force on board as possible. So our aim is, overwhelming agreement, defined as 75%. If we can get more than that, great. We want as much consensus as possible. But, if we're going to say that this is a recommendation of the task force, 75% is kind of the cutoff point for that. And so we want to aim for as much consensus as we can. We also think if there is sort of a very significant overwhelming agreement, we should be able to say the task force has an overwhelming majority in support of X, right? Even if there are a couple people who do not support that, right? Having said that, we would note the perspective of the people who don't support it, right? So it's not like those voices would be lost. There would still be, an explanation of what happened, where there's disagreement, and what it is, and why those people who didn't sign on couldn't sign on, and potentially what that means, right? So that's the suggestion, and the idea here is to not to tie our hands so much that we can't say anything, but also really encourage us to try to bring all constituencies on board. When it comes to the final vote, people, as I mentioned or alluded to a second ago, you can either say, I endorse this, or you can say, I can at least live with it, right? Or you can say, I cannot live with it, which would be opposing, right? Or you can just say, I'm not going to vote, I'm going to abstain. And the idea is we want 75% can at least live with it, hopefully much more, right? I think that's sort of the threshold, but that doesn't mean that's sort of what we're aiming for. And again, in the final report, we're going to capture the weight of whatever the group suggested, right? Opposed, not imposed, well, it'll all be in there, and folks who are opposed, your perspective will be there as well, right? If that happens, and I'll just say sometimes that happens, but oftentimes people are surprised at how much consensus can be built in these processes. We'll only issue one report, so it's not like we're going to outsource a minority report. But again, that one report will include any differences of opinion that came up. It'll just be in one document. So I want to just check in. That's our suggestion. It's important to agree on this in advance because, we want to have everyone on board before we kind of delve into the substance, right? But, at the end, this is what will guide us. So I want to just check, does this feel like acceptable to the group, this decision rule? Are there any objections or concerns?
Vicky
Okay, Paul gives it a thumbs up.
Vicky has. her
Vicky
hand.
has her hand up. Yeah, please, Vicky, go ahead.
Yeah, so I love the optimism of the idea that we will come up with one idea that gets 75% consensus. I'm wondering, one, it feels so early for me to feel that yet, given we haven't started the discussions. So I'm in the light of just putting it out on the table, I'm putting that on the table. And then it also feels to me like there might be a scenario in my head where we come up with a couple of directions that the town gets to vote on. And then how is that represented in this? We have one recommendation that's getting a vote of 75%.
Yeah. So typically what we try to do is you know, if there are multiple elements to like what is a recommendation, right? A recommendation could include one general course of action that we think makes sense, plus additional pieces that we think might make that more acceptable for certain constituencies, right? It could be a package, right? And oftentimes that's how we build consensus. It's through not just a single thing, but a package, right? That generally can get everyone on board. And that package would be what we're voting on for 75%, right? Sometimes we might have consensus on like 9 parts of a package and then a difference on the 10th, right? In which case we would report that, right? So the idea here is we're being very transparent about what we're agreeing on and what we're not. We are trying to build as much consensus as we can through, if we need to build a package with multiple elements to it, right? That can be helpful sometimes, right? But we would sort of be voting, if we can, on the overall package generally, unless we need to, and we can separate out issues if it comes to it, but we'll talk about that at the time. So Vicky, is that responsive? Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah.
Clarification on that, what ultimately has to be brought before the town is a single decision, not several options. Is that correct, or maybe?
It doesn't have to be one. I mean, it can be a recommendation or recommendations, or as Toby says, a package.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
so there's some flexibility there. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
And it just, sometimes it might be, we recommend further consideration of the following 3 options, and we lay out what that might look like, right? It really, I think, depends on what we decide, right? There's flexibility to figure out what we can build consensus around versus not.
Mhm.
Okay, unless there are more questions about this, I'll press forward, and I think, assuming there's sort of, consent to this decision rule, that's important that we're agreeing. So if anyone objects strongly, I think now is the opportunity to raise that. We will say this is our decision rule, okay? Okay. So we want to talk a little bit about co-chairs. So Mark, thank you for raising this. And this is definitely, an issue that needs consideration. So we were talking about this, so Rachel, Julia, Bert, and I before this meeting, about how to handle the situation of co-chairs or chairs. And we just wanted to name a couple considerations that we think are relevant and helpful. And we're gonna talk about this offline and maybe come back with a clearer plan in the next meeting, just to give you a heads up. But generally, we understand that typically in the town of Concord, you have chairs or co-chairs for these task forces, so that might lead us to doing that for this. On the other hand, with this task force, we have Rachel and myself, and we, are here to help out. I think we're not actually members, so I don't know what that means, if we can be chairs or not, right? We're impartial facilitators,
Chair.
right?
Something else.
Right, but we are here, and it means that there's a lot of work that is gonna need to happen to make us get through this huge scope of work, right? It's just like 10 months, right? So that's why we're here, right? We're here to help with that. Wouldn't be realistic to expect a chair, citizen to do that, or a co-chair to do that. So we think if we go with a co-chair or a chair model, it's gonna be a lighter role. There's not gonna be the kind of full meeting design and management role that it might be the case in other task forces. So we also think, even though Rachel and I are here and we can, help design meetings and work with Delia, Bert, and others to get the information that you all want to have at your fingertips, it's still really helpful to have, even though we're going to be checking in with all of you pretty frequently about what you want to work on, to have, 1 or 2 people who are sort of designated, help us think through what the task force wants and would really benefit from. So we see some benefits to having some additional eyes to help us plan. At the same time, we think it's kind of helpful for us all to be equals here, right? Not to say like anyone is somehow above anyone else. And we also recognize that there are, some different perspectives. We know there are, strong opinions on this issue coming into the room. So if we were to do a chair, it might be helpful to have sort of co-chairs, where there are different perspectives represented in that chair. At the same time, and Rachel and I talked about this, we don't want to presume that we're in separate camps,
Yeah.
right? Because actually we
Yeah.
all are kind of part of the same team here. So even the idea of co-chairs maybe is setting up a dichotomy that we
yeah.
don't really want to
Doesn't
support.
really exist. We
Right.
don't want to create that.
Yeah,
right? We don't
yeah.
want to create division when there isn't, or sort of force people to choose that they should only talk to one of the chairs.
Right.
It's, you know, there are mousetraps all through these kinds of decisions.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we also want to be really respectful of the sort of the norms of the town and how town committees and task forces are set up. We don't want to, you know, put any kind of a wedge into that or, you know, force this issue on you. In talking about it, I mean, Toby and I swung back and forth about chairs, no chairs, what would it be like? I mean, I guess just adding to that question about the no chair topic, it puts a lot of weight on CBI to carry this, but we can do it. Not having a chair, it really demonstrates the group as a group of equals where, and you know, there's something symbolic in that, in my mind, about a group that functions in that way without an actual like designated, I'm the leader kind of thing that it's hard to avoid when you have a chair.
Yeah.
But at the same time, co-chairs, single chair, there are lots of ways that groups function. They function quite well, you know, with the group understanding what, you know, they don't have to just talk to the chair. They can talk to each other.
Yeah. So, I see Bill's hand, so go ahead, Bill, thoughts on this?
This is minor, but when I've chaired things before, where I co-chaired things at least, I always would tell people who would speak to me that no matter what you say to me, I'm going to tell the co-chair. So that was very clear right away that there wasn't going to be a division between me and the other person who was running something. So there's one perspective.
Yeah, yeah. So I think I'll definitely take the question, Mark. Yeah, the comment, Mark, please go ahead.
So, I'd echo that. I think that if you go with the co-chair model, it's really important that the co-chairs agree to that kind of thing. I've seen it work. I think that it's really common and almost expected in Concord that task forces and committees have some kind of chairperson structure. I've done that role on different committees that I've been on, and you're taking on a role as hopefully the servant of the committee. When you do that, it's the leadership aspect of it is way overstated, I think, in many cases, but the process that many committees use to select a chair has to do with some self-nomination process or discussion that can take place over a meeting or two. So I would suggest that given this discussion, we think about it and maybe plan this part of the agenda. The main thing that a chairperson or co-chairs need to do is to make sure that the agendas are posted, that eventually the minutes are hopefully in a timely basis, the minutes are filed by the clerk. This task force is really in a fortunate position from the perspective of many committees and task forces in Concord, in that it's really well resourced from a staff perspective. So that's unusual. And although it is also relatively high profile, so, you know, if it's your first rodeo, maybe not. But I would encourage everybody to think about those roles and maybe talk to anybody that you know that has chaired a board or committee in Concord, and then decide whether that's something that you might be willing to put yourself forward for. I'd be willing to entertain any one of you.
Just one other, maybe minor aspect of the importance of a chair or co-chair. There are monthly chair breakfasts.
Yeah.
And it's a good communication mechanism to the other departments of the town, what's going on.
Interesting.
So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
that may be the most important thing that the chair here can do, to communicate to other committees and departments in the town.
That's really helpful to know. Okay, so I think why don't we leave this for now, but I'll just say, you know, I think if we went with like a chair or co-chair model, I think I'll just say like our thinking was we'll probably end up with co-chairs, right? And the role would essentially be, you know, in addition to Mark, sort of the things that you mentioned, right? And joining the breakfasts, Paul, right? Joining us for, you know, at least one planning call. We would certainly be doing more than one planning call before each of the meetings, but to help us think through the agenda and really make sure that it's meeting the needs of the task force overall. And I'll just say, like, we certainly would welcome the input of co-chairs and be very helpful for us in doing that. Okay, so I think just for time, yeah, I'm gonna just say, we're almost at 7.
Yeah.
We've been thinking about how to spend our time together. So you'll have these slides. This was our initial sort of very high level timeline of what we thought our work might look like. So we're kicking off now. March and April, we're going to be reviewing key documents, maybe do an initial site visit, think about how we're going to reach out to the public, right? How we might do that, what we might want to learn from them. Potentially do that within the next few months to get that early input. Then if from the spring into the summer, we're going to be doing a lot of learning and exploration around the alternatives and how they meet these different criteria. So really digging into the weeds of what they might look like and what seems feasible and what not, and how they perform against our metrics, et cetera. And then when we get to, and potentially more site visits, right? Seeing the pond in different seasons, right, could be helpful. And then when we get to the fall, that's when we really work towards decision-making, drafting, trying to come towards consensus. And, you know, we imagine probably different steps with the public along the way, right? Early input, maybe coming out with a draft that we get more input on, right? To finalize by December 2nd. So they'll just say, you know, looking at the time, I won't say much, but that's a lot. Okay, so it's going to be busy. So I'm going to just move right now to the next steps. So meeting scheduling. Oh yeah, question? Yeah.
So you go first.
Okay, I'm still a bit concerned by the December 2 timeline.
Yeah.
Because if I recount later the warrant process, the wording for the first initial wording needs to be done by mid-December. So you have literally kind of 10 business days between December 2nd and that deadline.
It is too late for NRC.
So I'm just, you
Yeah, I mean, I think
have to
that's-
think about it
Yeah.
again, is what is,
I think
The
that the
timing of it.
NRC will have to make a decision on whether they are going to be prepared to act that quickly on the recommendation. And I think it's
And-
gonna depend on what the recommendation is.
and perhaps there should be some kind of a pre-loop or pre-communication with the,
Mhm.
with
Well,
the
we have an
NRC.
NRC rep and
Yeah.
staff. So that, I mean, there will be communications with the NRC.
Yeah, but the rep can only, let's say, it's, yeah, but
Yeah.
think about it, this is just 10 business days.
Likewise, we'll have to ask ourselves at some point in the process, well before December, whether we're on track for that.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
you know, we may have to do that almost every meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
So, just on the communication side, before we wrap things up, is it okay to have, you know, conversations with other members of the group outside of the formal meetings? And if
Less than a
so,
quorum.
does that have to be, could I meet with Keith? And we could talk about something, or does it have to be documented that we've done
Less
that?
than a quorum. So
Quorum,
there's an
quorum, yeah,
11-member
Yeah.
voting block of the
Mhm.
committee. So, you know, 5. I don't advise it, you know, but if there's 2 or 3 people who are gonna get together and or you run into each other at Crosby's and you, what do you think about it? That's fine.
Right.
And I would recommend reporting out if there's something of substance at the next committee meeting, but the open meeting law is you cannot have a conversation with a quorum outside of a posted meeting.
Okay.
Yeah,
But, yeah.
it's worth it to get to know each other. We should do that. And it's also expected that you're gonna share information and perspectives. the open meeting law training that you'll take online, we'll talk about this. But what you don't want to do is engage in sort of either serial discussion, well, you know, I talked to Swen and he said this, and then I went and talked to Vicky and she said that, and you know, that kind of thing is really out of bounds. And the idea of sort of going around and canvassing the whole committee to, you know, even if it's one-on-one. So, you know, when you're pushing an agenda versus learning and sharing information, and that's but do take the open meeting law training and make sure you understand it. But the technical rule is, you know, anything more than 50% of the group in one place is a meeting. Which doesn't mean that you can't all be in the same room, because if you're not talking about you know, if you're at town meeting or someplace else, or, you know, a baseball game, you're not talking about it, you're not talking about it, and then, you know, you don't have to run away if you see 4 other people from the task force.
Okay, so we know we're just a bit over time, just in terms of next steps. We're gonna send out a poll after this meeting around scheduling. It's gonna ask basically when works for you, for me, when works best for you, daytimes, evening meetings. Are there dates that you know, or generally you can't make Tuesday afternoons, right? Just days when you know you can't make it generally, specific conflicts you know about in advance, to help us try to come up with meeting times that are gonna work the best for as many people as possible. So please stay tuned for that. Please respond. It's gonna be really important and helpful for us to know that, so we can get as many people here as possible. Next meeting is going to be late February, early March. We're going to follow up with some reading. Our general plan for this meeting is to sort of get into everyone's brains some core information about the history, what's been studied, right? What we've learned, what we know, what we don't know, so we can kind of start level setting and moving on to exploring sort of the new information we need to learn. Rachel and I are also going to be reaching out to try to have a one-on-one with each of you. So you'll be either meeting with Rachel or with myself. We hope we can schedule a 45-minute call with each of you just to get to know you a little bit, learn a little more about what you're hoping this commission can achieve, hear your advice for the process, what kind of information you'd like us to bring in, etc. And then last, after this meeting, we're going to send out a very quick little meeting eval poll just to get some feedback from you in terms of how it's going. It's very simple, like, how'd the meeting go? What worked well? Can you give us more advice? Okay. Anything else you want to add, Rachel?
I'm good.
Delia, anything else you want to add? Question, yeah, Christine, go ahead.
Just a quick question that, are we going to, after each meeting, plan the next meeting, or are we gonna have a schedule throughout the year? What do you?
Yeah, so great question. So yeah, I mean, a couple other things. We will sort of send around a meeting summary after this, okay? And we will, I think, intend to have, you know, as far out as we can schedule, right? So we're not, you know, we're gonna give you things that, you know, scheduled in advance as much as we can. If we have to reschedule, we'll do it, but getting at least, you know, a number of months in advance. And we will be doing a lot of meeting planning between meetings. I think we will definitely be asking the group sort of what you want in future meetings, both in our individual calls and with the group. We'll be presenting you with sort of our version of a work plan, getting feedback from you on if that meets your needs, right? And I think we should have, you know, we'll have a general sense of where we're going, where we're at, what's next, right? We are going to speak with you first before designing that, because at this point, I think we still don't know, right? But that's going to depend a lot on what we hear from you, in terms of what you need, what you want, to be helpful to help make this decision and come up with these recommendations. So give that some thought, all right, before our phone call, because we're really going to use that to help plan out these next 10 months. Good question. Yeah. Anyone else have anything? Okay, Wilson, thank you. Great to meet you all. We'll be in touch very soon about scheduling. Please respond to that quick eval, and please, you know, we look forward to the one-on-one. So help us with scheduling that as well. Have a great week.
When did you?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Bye.
So,
Bye.
you need a pen?
Yeah.
So you should find the one with your name on it if that wasn't obvious.